Have you ever had to deal with a situation that was really, really bad and you just seemed unable to escape it? From a five senses viewpoint, a human logic viewpoint, it was totally outside of your control to do anything about. And yet, you knew that it was a really bad situation and it just wasn't right. What do you do when you find yourself in that kind of situation? And if you haven't, what would you do? Do you just resign yourself to accepting something that is not at all right? Well, this evening we're going to be looking at a situation and a person that found themselves in that kind of situation. And except for his conviction that God answers prayer, he had every right to feel like there was nothing he could do about it. But he did trust God, and God took care of him. We've been looking at Israel's return from the exile. And this evening we're going to be getting into the story of the rebuilding. We're going to start the rebuilding of the walls of the city of Jerusalem. For the most part, we'll be in Nehemiah. But before we get to Nehemiah, I want to go back and talk a little bit about what we covered the other day, Sunday, with the rebuilding of the temple when they first came back out of captivity. When Israel first came out of exile, when Cyrus the Great made it available, opened the doors for them to return from Persia to their homeland, the first thing they did was rebuild the temple. And we saw, as we covered that record, that they faced some real opposition. We saw that they got discouraged. We saw that they got distracted. And then the prophets, Haggai and Zechariah, called them back to that work and finishing the work that they had begun, and they did complete that work. By the way, I had a timeline, and for those of you that are here this evening and weren't here on Sunday, make sure before you leave that you get this timeline that we'll be covering over not only this evening, but in these ongoing teachings. And kind of where we're at in this timeline right now, they completed the rebuilding of the temple during the reign of Darius the Great, or Darius I, who is not to be confused with the Darius in the record of Daniel and the lions. That was Darius II. So he's another Darius, but this one is much earlier, much earlier. And that happened, the completion of the temple happened in 516. Now, besides just kind of giving you a running start of where we're at and refreshing your memory, or for those that didn't hear the teaching, giving you an idea where we're coming into the story, I also want to clarify some things that, as you read the record in Ezra especially, but other places as well, it can get confusing of what happens when. Because we saw it the other day with Ezra, events are taken out of a chronological order and written about what seems to be at a time that they didn't happen, because it is by way of explaining how much opposition they faced and how it continued to escalate. There are 3 letters that are written by the adversaries of Israel's rebuilding projects. The Samaritans and the other people that are living in that land that had been brought there by originally the Assyrians. And they have continued to oppose them, and they do all kinds of things to stop them. We've seen some of it. But I want to review what these different things were that happened, and you can kind of follow them by keying into the letters, but it's important to keep these letters straight, and the way to do that is to see who they're writing to. It's not just some king. Each one is addressed to a specific king, and that puts them at different times during the course of these events. The first letter that happens in terms of chronological order is a letter of inquiry that was written during the reign of Darius. So right after Haggai and Zechariah reproved these guys for forgetting about the building of the temple and instead getting all concerned about their own houses, right after they start the building again, the local officials, the ones that are the Samaritans and others around them, they say, hey, what are you guys doing? Who said you could do this? Who said you could build this temple? And there is they say Cyrus did. Cyrus the Great, Cyrus the King. He gave us permission. He gave us a letter giving us permission to do it. And they said, well, we'll find out about that. And they write a letter of inquiry to Darius, because now we're to that point. This is right. That all happens under Darius. They had stopped building, they're reproved, and they start building again. This is under Darius, and then that letter's sent. And it kind of backfires for those guys that are trying to oppose them, because they look up and find Cyrus's original decree that gave them the authority. I made mention when I taught this on Sunday that he not only proclaimed it, but put it in writing. And I told you that becomes important later on. Well, this is the later on, or at least the first later on, where they look it up and they say, we've got the proof. And not only does he find the proof, but Darius says, don't try to stop them. And if you do try to stop them, you know what we're going to do? We're going to tear your houses down and use the building materials to help build the temple, which I thought was pretty good. So the temple project is secured and completed. The next letter that you deal with, and by the way, that account is in Ezra 6, chapter 6, verses 1 to 12. The next letter that is talked about, and it's really just referred to, is sent to, in the Bible, the king known as Ahasuerus, and more widely known as Xerxes. And they basically send a letter of accusing, but nothing comes of it. And this king is the one that was married to Esther. Now, there's no way of knowing when the letter was sent, if it was sent before Esther was in the picture, or while, or after, no idea. But they send a letter, and nothing comes of that. But there is mention of that letter in Ezra chapter 4, verse 6. The third letter we're going to actually look at, and this is sent to Artaxerxes. So in terms of the different kings of Persia that happened during this time period, we went from Cyrus to Cambyses, Cambyses. And that's not even pretty much mentioned, but it's implied. And then the one I talked about from Darius, and that's in 422 to 486, his reign. Then we go to Xerxes, or Ahasuerus, and now we are to Artaxerxes. And this is a letter sent at the time, and this is at the time of Nehemiah. So in Ezra chapter 4, verse 7, and in the days of Artaxerxes, and there's a bunch of people, but they're the Samaritans and company, they wrote unto Artaxerxes, king of Persia. And the writing of the letter was written in the Syrian tongue, which is Aramaic, and interpreted in the Syrian tongue, Aramaic. Skipping down to verse 11. And again, this is being talked about in the record in Ezra 4, but it does not fit within that time frame of events that other things are described in Ezra 4. And in verse 11 it says, "This is the copy of the letter they sent unto him, even unto Artaxerxes the king. Thy servants, the men, on this side the Euphrates," talking about the Euphrates River, "and at such a time be it known unto the king, that the Jews which came up from thee to us are come unto Jerusalem, building the rebellious and the bad city, and have set up the walls thereof and joined the foundations." They're saying, "King, this is Artaxerxes. You know, there's some Jews that came out of Persia, and they've come to our side of the river now, still part of the Persian Empire. And these are a bad people and a rebellious people." Verse 13, "Be it known unto the king that if the city be builded and the wall set up again, that they will not pay toll, tribute, and custom, and so they shall and damage the revenue of the kings." These guys are pretty smart. They figure, you know, we've tried different things. We've tried different ways to stop these guys. I know how we can get through to the king. We'll hit him with the wallet. We'll hit them right where it counts. We'll say that these guys, they're a bad people, they're rebellious, and they won't be willing to pay your taxes. And they won't pay any kind of taxes. So this is going to hurt you, king. Verse 15. And they recommend in verse 15 that search be made. You know, we're telling you these guys have always been this way. They have a reputation for being rebellious, for being people that weren't willing to pay their taxes. And they tell them to do a search, and you'll find that this whole city is rebellious and hurtful unto kings and provinces. They've been this way forever. And it's this reason that the city was destroyed in the first place. Verse 16, "We certify the king," I'll promise you, king, "that if the city be builded again, and the walls thereof set up, by this means thou shalt have no portion on this side of the river." If these guys are able to build this city and rebuild those walls, well, you might as well just kiss it all goodbye right now. They won't be part of Persia. They won't be paying any taxes. They won't be subject. They'll just set up their own country again. So, in verse 17 it says, "The king sent an answer." And in verse 18, "The letter which he sent unto us has been plainly read before me. And I commanded, and search hath been made, and it is found that you're right." That's what he goes on to say. We looked into it, and you're absolutely right. These guys have had a reputation of being rebellious. These guys haven't been willing to be governed. And, you know, a lot of people try over the history of Israel to occupy them, to overtake them, but they're always rebellious. They're never willing to just go along with it. Verse 21, "Give ye now commandment to cause them to cease." This is King Artaxerxes giving this commandment. And he's saying, tell them to stop. "And that the city be not builded until another commandment shall be given from me." And it's a good thing that he included that one in there. Because you remember one thing that if you know the record of Daniel, you know about the Persian laws. Once they made one, why, there was no change in it. There was no change in it. So he doesn't just say they can't ever. He says, tell them to stop until you hear from me again, unless I change my mind. Verse 23. "Now when the copy of the king Artaxerxes' letter was read, they went up in haste to Jerusalem unto the Jews and made them to cease by force and power." They stop them. They stop them cold. They send an army, whatever they have to do to tell these guys to cease and desist, and they make sure that they do. Now we'll go to Nehemiah chapter 1. Nehemiah 1, verse 1. The words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah. And it came to pass in the month Chislew, in the 20th year, as I was in Shushan the palace, the Hanani, one of my brethren, came, he and certain men of Judah. And I asked them concerning the Jews that had escaped, which were left of the captivity, and concerning Jerusalem. Nehemiah, as you will see as we continue to read, serves in the court of the king Artaxerxes. In fact, he holds a very chief and key position in his court. But he's been cut off from what's going on. You know, it's not like they just picked up the phone or even had any regular communication going back and forth. He doesn't know what's been going on. He knows that there's lots of his people that have gone to the land. And he knows that at this particular point in time, they've been starting to work at rebuilding the walls of the city. They've already completed the temple. That was done quite a long time ago. In fact, we're up to his reign is from 465 to 424. So we're somewhere in there. And we saw that the temple had been completed by 516 BC. So a good amount of time has passed between these events. But we have Nehemiah there, and he hasn't heard what's going on until one day a friend of his shows up at court. And he asked, hey, tell me about what's happening back there. He asked him about the Jews that escaped and left and what's going on in Jerusalem. Verse 3. And they said unto me, the remnant that are left of the captivity there in the province are in great affliction and reproach. They're having a really bad time. Boy, things are going terrible for them. They're in affliction, a lot of persecution, distress, and reproach. Everybody's against them. Furthermore, it goes on to say, the wall of Jerusalem also is broken down, and the gates thereof are burnt with fire. This is really bad news. This is really bad news. It's a situation that upsets Nehemiah. It's one that is terrible, but what can he do? What can he do? He's not there to help them. He's not some great, strong military leader. He's serving the king. And it's not like he can just take off whenever he wants. From a five senses standpoint, there isn't anything that this man can really do to help his countrymen, to help the people that he cares about. But he's not a man who just gives up. Verse 4. And it came to pass when I heard these words, that I sat down and wept and mourned certain days and fasted. This hits him hard. This is not just something that doesn't touch him, so what do I care? These are his brothers. These are his countrymen. These are people he cares about. And when he gets this bad news, he takes it hard. He sits down and he cries, and it doesn't say how many days, but certain days, and he fasted. But he doesn't stay at that point. He doesn't just accept the unacceptable. He doesn't just resign himself that, what a terrible thing's going on. I feel so bad. I wish there was something I could do about it. No. What does it say he does? He prays. Continuing verse 4. And he prayed before the God of heaven, and said, I beseech thee, O Lord God of heaven, the great and terrible, which is Old English, just means mighty God, that keepeth covenant and mercy for them that love him and observe his commandments. keeps covenant because God had a covenant, a promise that he had made with Israel. And it will talk about some of the detail of that in a minute. And mercy, because he is a God of mercy. Verse 6, let thine ear now be attentive. Listen to this prayer. And thine eyes open, that thou mayest hear the prayer of thy servant, which I pray before thee now. How often? Day and night. Day and night. He didn't just pray once and forgot about it. He didn't just pray and then, well, I did that. He prayed day and night. This was something that he prayed all the time about. For the children of Israel, thy servants, and confess the sins of the children of Israel, which we have sinned against thee. Both I and my father's house have sinned. We have dealt very corruptly against thee, and have not kept the commandments, nor the statutes, nor the judgments which thou commandest thy servant Moses. He didn't blame God, did he? No. He knew that the reason why they were in this terrible situation, why they ever got into trouble in the first place, was because they had transgressed God's commandments. They had worshiped other gods. They had ignored the warnings of the prophets. They had done all the things that they shouldn't have done. And here, as Nehemiah goes to God, he brings us all back up and says, God, I know that this is what happened. I understand why we're in this situation in the first place. Verse 8, remember, I beseech thee. He's imploring God. The word that thou commandest thy servant Moses, saying, if ye transgress, I will scatter you abroad among the nations. Remember that, but remember also, verse 9, but if ye turn unto me. Because with all the warnings was also that promise that if you turn back to me, if you at some point come to your right mind and come back to me and keep my commandments and do them, continuing verse 9, though there were of you cast out unto the uttermost part of the heaven, yet will I gather them from thence, and will bring them unto the place that I have chosen to set my name there. I don't care how far you've been scattered. If they scatter you to the far ends of the earth, every place under heaven, I will gather you back together if you turn your hearts back to me. Verse 10, now these are thy servants and thy people, that I have chosen to set my name there. No. These are my chosen people, whom thou hast redeemed by thy great power and by thy strong hand. Verse 11, O Lord, I beseech thee, let now thine ear be attentive to the prayer of thy servant, and to the prayer of thy servants, him and the others that would be praying, who desire to fear thy name. And prosper, I pray thee, thy servant this day, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man, referring to the king, for I was the king's cupbearer. He's praying to God. He's asking God for help. But he also recognizes that he is in a unique position here. And he recognizes that although he seems to be a position of not great power, with God's help, the access to this king can really make a huge difference. He's got a plan in the back of his mind. I don't know how formulated this plan was at that point, because as we continue the record, it just seems like kind of events happen as they happen. But he's looking for God to work with him in the situation to turn things around. He prayed. He prayed, and he prayed knowing that God was a merciful God, a God who would honor his covenant, his promise, and part of that promise being that if they ever did turn back to him, he would turn to them. Chapter 2 of Nehemiah. Verse 1. And it came to pass in the month Nisan, in the 20th year of Artaxerxes the king, that wine was before him. And I took up the wine and gave it unto the king. Now I had not been before time sad in his presence. Wherefore the king said unto me, Why is this thy countenance sad, seeing thou art not sick? This is nothing but sorrow of heart. Then I was very sore afraid. Why? Well, he's the king's cupbearer. And he's bringing him wine, but that's not the only job of the king's cupbearer. It's a much bigger position than that seems to imply. It's not just even like a butler. In modern terms, in terms of influence of office, this would be like his chief of staff. This is somebody that has great influence to the king. And yet, the kings of Persia has a rule. They didn't want to be bothered with the people that work for them's problems. They didn't really want to be brought down by them being sad in their presence. And the kings of Persia wielded great power. And they didn't really need to have good reason to do whatever they wanted. When you read the record of Esther, Esther was also concerned about looking sad in the king's presence. And she recognized, and there's other things that happened in that record too, but that king could have just used that as a reason to have her killed. And that was at least a possibility that it could have happened with Nehemiah. Just to be in the king's disfavor was not ever a good thing. So that's why when he says he was afraid, he was. But you know, his face communicated something. He wasn't doing this to be manipulative. He wasn't going in there with a long face and, moping around so the king would say, "Oh, what's wrong? What can I do to help you?" This is what he felt. But it does have an effect. Verse 3. And said unto the king, Let the king live forever. Why should not my countenance be sad? Yes, well, I'll tell you. When the city, the place of my father's sepulchres, lie waste, and the gates thereof are consumed with fire. How can I help be sad? The place I came from, the place where my fathers are buried, this land that means so much to me and all of our people, lies waste, and the gates thereof consumed with fire. How can I not feel bad? And I hear this news about everything and how bad things are there still. Then verse 4, the king said unto me, For what dost thou make request? What do you want me to do? What can I do to help? Does he answer right away? No. He says, So I pray to the God of heaven. He's walking with God moment by moment in this situation. He had prayed to God before he ever walked into work that day. And now that he's in the situation and things begin to unfold, he continues to just pray. He continues to look to God to direct his steps, to show him what to do. And I said unto the king, If it please the king, and if thy servant have found favor in thy sight, that thou wouldst send me unto Judah, unto the city of my father's sepulchres, that I may build it. I don't know what his background is. I don't imagine that he ran a construction company or that he had all kinds of that knowledge and skills. But he says, hey, I might not have the ability, but I've got the availability. Send me. I'll figure it out from there with God. And the king said unto me, the queen also sitting by him, For how long shall thy journey be? Well, I'll let you go, but I want you back at some point here. And when wilt thou return? So it pleased the king to send me, and I set him a time. They come up to an agreement of how long he's going to be gone. Verse 7. Moreover, I said unto the king, if it please the king, let letters be given me to the governor beyond the river, that they may convey me over till I come unto Judah. Boy, here he's walking with God, because these letters are going to be important. He needs letters that says that he has permission. Because all of these guys he's going to encounter, we've already seen this in the history of it, they want proof that you've got the authority to do what you're doing. So he doesn't just ask to go, he asks for that to be put in writing, that he has the authority to go there and to rebuild the walls. Verse 8. And a letter unto Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the palace, which appertain to the house, and for the wall of the city, and for the house that I shall enter into. My grandmother used to have an expression. She'd say, would you like egg in your beer too? And it meant, I've already done all this for you, and yet you're asking for more? But that's the nerve that Nehemiah has in this situation. Not only does he ask for permission to go and letters to say so, but while you're at it, king, write a letter to the keeper of the forest to give me all the materials, all the building materials I need to do the job. And the king granted me. Did I do that? Okay. And a letter unto Asaph the keeper, that he may give the timber and make beams for the gates of the palace, and for the walls of the city, and for the house that I shall enter into. And the king granted me according to the good hand of my God upon me. The king granted, but boy, who does Nehemiah give the glory to? God. Because he knew that it was God who was making this happen. He acted, but boy, he acted with God. We closed out the other day with God being our fellow worker. Well, God was Nehemiah's fellow worker. Nothing that he did he do on his own. And next time, we'll see how this all goes.